Hi, my name is Jean Gao. I'm a sophomore at Binghamton University, and in this video I'll be discussing why the United States should be paying reparations to African Americans. Harms include economic injustice towards African Americans in the past, global morality, and increased racial divide. The solvency of reparations will solve these issues, these harms, and reparations has inherency because reparations have not been paid sufficiently to African Americans in this country. Reparations are topical and significant because they are relevant, and voting for them will solve for the harms. Reparations are due because there has been a transgression, both economic and moral, and that transgression is unpaid labor. Unpaid labor occurred during the 175 years of lawful slavery in this country, as well as oppression for the next 100 years after the abolition of slavery under Jim Crow legislation. Some will argue that by abolishing slavery and assimilating blacks into society as free men is enough to justify our past deeds, which is not true. What the federal government has done thus far has been insufficient. Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote for The Atlantic in 2014 and said this: "It is as though we have run up a credit card bill and, having pledged to charge no more, remain befuddled that the balance does not disappear. The effects of that balance, interest accruing daily, are all around us." What Ta-Nehisi Coates said in The Atlantic in 2014 is absolutely true. According to statistics provided by the National Poverty Center, 27.4% of blacks in America are below the poverty line. What reparations will do for those blacks below the poverty line is provide a boon to consumer spending in the U.S., as well as boosting the overall economy and GDP of the nation. I propose that reparations be paid over the course of 20 to 25 years so as to not put too much pressure on the American federal government. And for those whose ancestors have suffered under slavery but are not under the poverty line, we should be able to give them tax cuts similar to the tax cuts provided to people like Dick Cheney and such. Another reason why reparations are necessary is for the preservation of a moral global economy. The United States should follow the lead of countries like Germany and Austria, who have paid the equivalent of $50 million and $25 million respectively to Jewish survivors of the Holocaust, as well as Japan, who have paid reparations to comfort women for World War II. This would lead to higher awareness of global morality and is obviously a means to rectify our historical injustices. In addition, if the United States doesn't pay reparations and allows slavery to just pass without having to face repercussions, other people will think that they're permitted to continue carrying out crimes of similar magnitudes, which will lead to even more economic and moral transgressions against blacks, and which will further the racial divide. For instance, Louisiana State Penitentiary, or Angola Prison, is the largest privatized prison in the nation and functions as a working farm. Inmates are forced to do agricultural work in the widest sense of the word. They are usually forced to do manual labor. Wardens and other prison employees currently are direct descendants of the original slave owners of the Angola plantation, and 76% of the population of the inmates are comprised of blacks. A large percentage of those black inmates are actually direct descendants of the slave who once worked at Angola plantation, laboring all day just like their ancestors did. An institution like Angola Prison, so deeply rooted in racism and slavery, can only exist if the United States doesn't pay reparations and admit its faults. Thank you, and that's my proposition for why reparations need to be paid in the United States for African Americans.